InvestKL Conversations, brought to you by BFM in collaboration with InvestKL.
I'm here today with Wong Siew Yap, the Managing Director of Linde Malaysia Sdn Bhd. Siew Yap, SY, thank you for joining us on InvestKL Conversations. Your company has been here for more than half a century. How are you leveraging your very long and established track record in Malaysia to expand into the wider ASEAN region?
You're quite right. I mean, we've been here for more than 50 years now. We separated our 50 years in 2010. And over the period of more than half a century, we have built up a strong presence in Malaysia. In fact, we have more than 50 plants throughout the whole country. And currently, we have a workforce of over 800. Yes, we do hold a leading position in our industrial segment, which is basically industrial gases.
Now, we understand that your presence in Malaysia is very much anchored by a remote operations center, which necessitates a very well-trained and very experienced workforce. How have you found building out this workforce in Malaysia?
Let's start with what really is a remote operations center, or what we call as in ROC. This is a transformative operation model that we have introduced to this part of the world, that's specifically South and Eastern Asia. And really, it is a nerve center, to monitor, control, and operate our plants throughout, not just only Malaysia, but in the greater region of South and East Asia, and maybe eventually expand into even the South Pacific. And in this course of the setting of ROC, one of the key criteria that we need to take into account are the technical or engineers that we may take up, to man this nerve center. As such, you must know that they need to be well-trained, versatile, as well as to look beyond just not only the plants in Malaysia, but across the whole region. And the people we choose then are people that will be from the universities, engineers, physicists, electronic and electrical engineers. But in essence, when we did this model and eventually rolled it out in Malaysia, we have to even ask ourselves, how are we going to keep these engineers motivated, concentrated, and contribute to the operations of the Linde across the world? So we also need to look at how we're going to develop the career of the engineers. And they are not necessarily what we call positioned in the physical sites, but operating and controlling plants in a remote center like Kuala Lumpur or in Shah Alam specifically, and looking at plants in India, in Korea, in Indonesia, without being present on site.
And so your comments run counter to the media reports that Malaysia has a lack of relevant and experienced talent in the country. Are you telling us that we actually do have a surfeit of necessary experience in this country?
I wouldn't say that we have surplus or surfeit of manpower of this nature, but we do have the required resource or talent that makes Linde's requirements. I can tell you that Malaysia was not chosen just because we raised our hand. We had to fight for it within the Linde world. When we set up a pilot in Singapore a couple of years ago in 2009, with the eventual intent to relocate to a much more cost-effective country, there were also other countries within the Linde world, who had put up their hands. For example, a obvious choice or option was with India, given the number of Indians, engineers that are available. Then you talk about the Philippines as well. But of course, a small country, Malaysia, with just nearly 30 million people, but with a large presence and a large coverage within the Linde world, we have to leverage on that. And personally, being a Malaysian, I have to put up my hand and say that I would like the ROC to be placed in Malaysia. Patriotic, partly selfish reasons, but at the end of the day, I feel that we have a workforce in Malaysia that has been nurtured over so many years, with good command of the English language, flexible, and to be able to be culturally sensitive, to interact with nationalities in other countries. And that's why we position Malaysia as being a good candidate for the Linde ROC for Southeast Asia. And of course, as you know, at the end of the day, we were picked on that respect for our people. Of course, you got infrastructure, connectivity, and livability as well within Malaysia that makes us eventually the selected choice.
So as well, you cited human capital, you cited geographical location centrality, you've also cited the infrastructure and the network. Were those the factors that tipped the scale in favor of KL, Kuala Lumpur?
I think that would be some key factors. But at the same time, I must admit, I've had the help of a few regulatory bodies as well as people like InvestKL, MIDA, SSIC, and even MDEC, who has come along to support even our candidature within our Linde group.
What kinds of assistance did these bodies assist you with?
For example, they pointed out to me from the onset, I said, I want to set up a operation center. They were very, very helpful in coming across to say, hey, look, you could qualify for some special status. And I've just told them we are not a call center, of course, but then they further, enlighten us. Look, there are such things like, even gaining MSc status, and you may get some incentives as well. And this is something that actually we, willingly embrace when they came across. And more importantly, they actually, help us follow through, not only with the selection process within the Linde world, but upon selection. And, they help us to actually move through and coordinate all the applications that are necessary to eventually help us to execute the project, which today, now we're in 6 months of operations.
So, of course, clearly going beyond your Malaysian positioning as well, the sum total of rebates, policy assistance, and of course, transport infrastructure as well as human capital measures. Ultimately, when the board at Linde was making the decision to locate your remote operation center in Malaysia, was it ultimately a difficult or easy decision?
I'm quite sure it was a difficult position for eventually the decision makers, although we were very confident that we could make a good case for Malaysia and for Linde Malaysia specifically. But we do have a make-up case, both from a financial return perspective, as well as to actually bring up to speed, the stakeholders within our organization, what Malaysia's government and regulatory framework can offer and be sustained in the years going forward. We do not want to set up a rock in this country only to be disappointed in a short period of time. That rules and regulations have changed does not make it actually attractive to continue to site in Malaysia. But this has not happened. Consistent set of rules, regulations, has helped us to implement this project. And today, I must admit, even receiving visitors from not only government bodies, as well as customers of ours in this country, but across the whole region as well. It is key milestone for us in Malaysia.
That's why we've been seeing that Malaysia has been creeping up. In fact, KL has been creeping up the ease of doing business rankings on a global basis. Has that really been borne out in your personal experience? And what specifically are measures that you like in terms of doing business in KL?
We have been in the country for more than 50 years. We consider ourselves very much a Malaysian operations, although we belong to the Linde Group. We operate our plants specifically for the Malaysian market. Our customers are in Malaysia. We are not in the export business. It's difficult to export air, as they say. And really, we have been quite used to the regulatory framework within the country. But I must admit, before we embark on this project, InvestKL came across to us. Not by specific intent or part, but we had a chance meeting at one of a business forum, and they have continued to pick up on that. And in fact, they push us to see, how they could have helped us to actually evolve as well as to implement our project. For that, I must admit, InvestKL, was been a primary force, and they were intensive, and they were persistent in following up with us.
That's why, how would you rate KL, in fact, Malaysia's regulatory reform initiatives, the rule of law, intellectual property protection, business precepts, as it were?
We are used to what we have been getting from the government with all our investment of more than 50 plants over the last few decades. And yes, Malaysia has accepted that there are the competitive environment, right? The competition among the nations within this region are very high. And I think Malaysia has to take cognizance of this fact and not just basically rest on its laurels. Today, Linde Malaysia is still very committed to investing and expanding our operations in the country. But more importantly, we are bringing new facilities, new services, new talent into this country, which is totally different from what we may have been doing even 10 or 20 years ago.
Over the long term, what other things would you like Malaysia, in fact KL, to be implementing to make doing business even easier than it is?
I think we need to continue to improve further on our infrastructure, specifically telecommunications, telecommunications reliability, MSC, facilities that is available needs to be continue to be upgraded, to keep pace with the rest of the other parts of the world. But maybe I'd like to go back to the point, I think, which we may have missed earlier on, people, right? We hear so much about Gen Y people. Even engineers do have a chat. We come across engineers who may not be prepared to stay in engineering for too long. And you have got this churn of people turnover in organization. And it is true rock that we even ask ourselves, is it an opportunity for us to actually develop a new career path for engineers, to maintain their interests, to continue to keep them motivated through changes in the way they operate plants, the way they develop themselves as engineers. For example, now that we operate plants not only in Malaysia, but across to India, Pakistan, it gives them a chance actually to interact with other nationalities. It provides them an insight to say that, hey, the utilities or energy reliability in other countries are different and may not be as good as Malaysia. So how do they have to change their mind in actually operating these plants compared to the much, much more developed infrastructure that we may have in Malaysia? So this maybe provide the continuing challenge to our young people or young talent to continue to be motivated and rather than just switch jobs.
SY, thank you for talking to us on the InvestKL Conversations.
InvestKL Conversations, brought to you by BFM in collaboration with InvestKL. Greater KL, the regional headquarters for MNCs in Asia. For more information on how InvestKL can help your business, visit www.investkl.gov.my.